All right, hello and welcome everyone. And today we are going to discuss the topic of pedestrian accidents and what's my case worth. Welcome to another segment of Live with Mitch, brought to you by Proner & Proner, a law firm with a global presence and expertise that feels local and personal. I'm your host, Mel Maguia. Today, we sit down with the expert himself, Mitch Proner, a personal injury attorney with over 30 years of experience, here to answer your questions and share insights you'll find useful in the personal injury world. And remember, all consultations are free and confidential. Reach us at any time at 1-800-321-1234. How are you doing, Mitch?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, so I know it's been, this is a very interesting topic. I definitely have some questions with this in terms of pedestrian, accidents. So, but can you expand on that?
So, with pedestrian accidents, what affects the value of the claim are, first of all, who's at fault for the incident. Second of all, what the injuries are. And third of all, how much insurance coverage is available. Now, sometimes when it comes to who's at fault for the incident, the police report might have the information wrong because at times the pedestrian can't speak after an accident and all they hear from is the driver of the vehicle. And what frequently happens in a pedestrian accident is, as a result of the impact, the pedestrian moves. The car or the truck or the bus that struck the pedestrian typically didn't see the pedestrian when they struck it. So they're moving as well. So what happens is, when the car hits the pedestrian and the driver doesn't see the pedestrian, well, the driver has a reaction time. Let's assume the reaction time is a second and a half, which is a typical reaction time to an unexpected event. So, an unexpected event. If I tell you, clap your hands when you hear the buzzer, and you're waiting for the buzzer to go off,
right,
and you hear the buzzer, and then you clap your hands, the time for your brain to perceive that you heard the buzzer, to send the information from your brain to your nerves and muscle fibers in your hands and arms to then clap, that could be a second. But a driver in a car isn't waiting to strike the pedestrian. It's unexpected. So the reaction time is longer. So if it's a second and a half, if a car is moving at 20 miles per hour, that would be 30 feet per second, approximately.
Okay.
Let's suppose it's going slower. It's only doing 10 miles an hour. That's still 15 feet per second.
Wow.
So during that second, the vehicle is still moving. And the pedestrian who's in front of them moving is moving with them, unless it gets flattened and ran over. But typically it's going to get hit and carried before it hits the ground. So the driver of the car or the bus or the truck, they will typically say, I stopped immediately. But physically, that's impossible because you've got reaction time and then you have stopping distance. There's no such thing as stopping on the dime because the driver has to take their foot from the accelerator, move it over to the brake, push down on the brake, and it all takes time. And then the computer relays, it used to be hydraulics, now it's computer relays inside they send an electrical impulse to the brakes. The brakes have to squeeze on the brake pads to the wheels, and then the wheel has to stop moving, and there's a coefficient of friction, and all this is distance. So the cop shows up afterwards, and he asks the driver what happened, and the driver says, I stopped right away.
Hmm.
And they see the pedestrian out of the crosswalk because everything moved. Pedestrian could be unconscious. So now the cop puts the point of impact outside the crosswalk.
Oh.
Now, there's an important legal distinction. In the crosswalk, the pedestrian has the right of way. When you're crossing out of the crosswalk, you got to look for moving traffic.
Hmm.
So now the pedestrian's at fault for an accident based on a police report that is inaccurate.
Wow.
So that, unfortunately, is a frequent circumstance. Sometimes there's witnesses all around. There's a video, and everybody says, no, he got hit in the crosswalk. Better scenario. It's not always the best scenario when the police arrive. And then the insurance adjusters, when they're looking at the claim, might get the information wrong. Fortunately, there are skilled attorneys. Not every attorney is skilled. That's the truth. Sad truth. You don't have to be a skilled attorney to run an ad. And you can run a law firm that's the biggest in the country. It doesn't mean the attorney that they assign working on your case is going to be skilled.
Right.
Because they can have problems with attorney turnover and burnout because they're running a pretty good business, and that means they're not paying the attorneys always what the attorney might believe. Whereas me, I don't suffer from that. I'm doing this for a while, and I like what I'm doing. I'm not burnt out. And I can look at a case, and I have the knowledge to say, this is a mistake.
Right.
And then sometimes I have to fight these cases, and fortunately, I've been successful. But who's at fault is the first issue. That might be easy, videos, everything in place, or might be difficult to overcome and take some work. Second thing is, what's the injury? Sometimes the injuries are apparent immediately. Sometimes they're not. I just finished a trial. The defendants, they went by the emergency room record, which said my client just had 4 stitches in his forearm. My client had ongoing complaints that ultimately diagnosed with mild concussive, post-concussive syndrome or mild traumatic brain injury, a neck injury requiring surgery, and a shoulder injury requiring surgery. They said, oh, that's not related. It's all degenerative. It's from aging. And they said their brain injury is nonsense. They had experts saying it was nonsense. The jury disagreed. And we ended up getting an award for $36.4 million. But we had to go to trial. They weren't offering that early on. I went to trial. I got that result for my client. That was just 2 weeks ago. But the trial went on for about 8 weeks. It was a big trial. So sometimes you got to fight on liability, and sometimes you got to fight on damages. Lastly, who hit the individual? Is it a truck from a company that has unlimited resources to pay an award? That might also mean they have unlimited resources to defend the claim, to try and avoid paying.
That's a good point.
Other times, if somebody broke with a minimum policy and they say, take whatever we have, and that case can be settled early on, but it might not be settled for much. You can't pretend somebody's rich when they're not. And if you sue somebody and they're broke, where's it going to go? Not everybody driving a car is wealthy.
Right.
People that aren't wealthy don't have to purchase much insurance under the law. It's only $25,000 in New York. And that might be all you're getting. So there's a lot of variables in terms of what the pedestrian accident's worth. But the best thing to do is consult an attorney that can look into all the possible angles to help get you the most compensation that you're entitled to under the law for the injuries you've sustained.
Right. Mitch, I did have a question, and I'm sure other viewers out there would have the same. Can you define a pedestrian? Like, what if you're on rollerblades, or if you're on a scooter? As that define someone as a pedestrian?
It's a good question. It's a good question, Mel. So, a pedestrian typically is somebody walking. But if somebody is on a skateboard or a scooter, under the law, they could be considered a pedestrian. If they're on an electric scooter or a gas-powered scooter, they might get into the category of a motorcyclist.
Oh, wow.
Now, a vehicle on the roadway is a vehicle on the roadway. So, naturally, if you're on rollerblades and you're going in a crosswalk with a pedestrian sign, you'll probably be considered a pedestrian.
Okay.
But if you're rollerblading down the road with vehicle traffic, you're probably not going to be considered a pedestrian. Now, of course, you don't have the same abilities to signal and put on your hazard lights that a car does. But you can hand signal. So this means turning left.
Yeah.
This means turning right. This means stopping. Not everybody knows the signals.
Yeah.
You gotta be careful for yourself too.
Right.
And realize that if you're engaging in these recreational activities, you're taking increased risk at times.
Yeah, that's great. No, thank you for answering that, because sometimes it doesn't seem clear, at least definitely for me. Well, there you have it, folks, straight from the expert himself, Mitch Proner. That's going to wrap it up for now. Thank you for taking the time to tune in, whether it's on our podcast or video broadcast. We really do appreciate it. And remember, you can reach us 24/7 at 1-800-321-1234, where all consultations are free and confidential. And if you haven't done it already, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. Like, share, and please subscribe to get the latest updates. Now, before we go, Mitch, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, that's it. Be careful out there. And if you get injured, get medical care. Don't worry about the bills. We can help you out with that. And to consult with us, as Mel mentioned, is always free and confidential, and we'll work hard for you. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Mitch, for another informative session. And thank you all for checking us out. I know I learned a lot, and I hope you all did too. Thank you again. Thank you again, Mitch.
Thank you, Mel. Bye-bye.